They were 18 and 19, with nowhere to go. So they bought a derelict bait shop for $5. What they found inside wasn't just a second chance. It was a reckoning. If you've ever felt lost, truly lost, and had to find a way to start over from nothing, hit that subscribe button. This story is for you. Maybe we can find our way together. The silence was the worst part. It was a specific kind of silence, the kind that rushes in to fill the space where a slammed door used to be. It was heavy and cold, settling over me and my sister Maya as we stood on the cracked concrete of the curb. Behind us, the house we'd grown up in was a blank face, its windows like vacant eyes. The yellow porch light, the one that was always supposed to guide us home, now seemed to be pushing us away, exposing us in its sickly glow. My knuckles were still throbbing, a dull, stupid ache from where I'd hit the doorframe instead of his jaw.
"He didn't even watch us leave," Maya said, her voice a flat line. She didn't look at me. She was staring at the house, her chin held high in that way she had, the one that made her look brave, even when I knew her hands were shaking. She had 2 duffel bags at her feet. I had one, and a backpack that felt like it was full of rocks. It wasn't. It was full of yearbooks and a few dog-eared paperbacks, things that couldn't be easily replaced, things that held the ghosts of a different life. Our stepfather, Rick, had given us 30 minutes. 30 minutes to pack up 18 years. His final words, shouted through the screen door as his new wife watched from the kitchen, weren't complicated. "You're 18 now, Leo. You're an adult, and adults who don't follow the rules of the house don't get to live in it." The rule I'd broken was simple. I'd told him what I thought of him, what I thought of the way he'd erased our mother from the house, photo by photo, memory by memory, until all that was left was his own reflection in the polished surfaces. Maya, a year older and therefore, in his eyes, a co-conspirator, was judged guilty by association. So there we were, orphans for a second time. Our mother had been gone for 6 years, a long, slow surrender to an illness that had stolen her voice long before it stole her breath. And now the man who had promised to care for us had shown us the door the moment it was legally convenient. "What do we do now?" I asked. The question felt enormous, a black hole that threatened to swallow the little bit of sidewalk we were occupying. My voice was thin, a boy's voice. I hated it. Maya finally turned to look at me. Her dark eyes, so much like our mom's, were clear. No tears. Maya saved her tears for private, for moments when she thought no one was looking. "We get a room for the night. We figure it out in the morning." She was the captain, always. She picked up her bags as if they weighed nothing. "Come on." We walked. We walked past manicured lawns and houses with warm lights glowing in the windows, families inside eating dinner, watching TV, living lives that felt like they belonged on a different planet. Every step took us further from the only place we'd ever called home, and deeper into a future that was a complete, terrifying blank. The night air was damp and smelled of cut grass and impending rain. It clung to my skin, a clammy shroud of uncertainty. We ended up at a bus station downtown, not because we had a destination, but because it was open all night, and the fluorescent lights offered a harsh, buzzing kind of safety. We didn't talk much. We sat on the hard plastic chairs, our bags huddled around our feet like a flimsy barricade. Maya pretended to read a crumpled bus schedule. I watched the clock on the wall, its red digital numbers marking the slow, agonizing death of our first night of freedom. It felt a lot like drowning. The next morning we found ourselves in the beige, soulless office of County Social Services. It smelled of stale coffee and quiet desperation. We were a number, a case file, a problem to be processed. We sat for 2 hours before a man with tired eyes and a kind, weary face called my name. His name was Mr. Henderson. He led us to a small cubicle cluttered with towers of manila folders that seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. He gestured for us to sit in the 2 chairs crammed in front of his desk. "Leo and Maya," he said, looking at a screen. "I've read your file. I'm sorry for what you're going through." It sounded genuine, which was almost worse than the practiced indifference we'd expected. Pity was a language we didn't know how to speak. Maya, ever the pragmatist, got straight to it. "Are there any resources? Emergency housing? Anything?" Mr. Henderson sighed, a long, slow exhalation of bureaucratic fatigue. "For an 18 and 19-year-old, it's complicated. You've aged out of most youth services. I can give you a list of shelters, but they're full most nights. I can sign you up for job placement programs, food assistance." He trailed off, knowing as well as we did that these were threads, not a safety net. He kept typing, his fingers moving slowly across the keyboard. He squinted at the screen. "Wait a second," he murmured. "This is odd." He clicked a few more times, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Your mother's file is cross-linked with your maternal grandmother's, Elara Vance. Did you know her well?" I shook my head. "She died when I was 5. We barely remember her. Mom didn't talk about her much, just that she lived up north, by the coast." "Well," Mr. Henderson said, leaning back in his chair, which squeaked in protest, "it seems your grandmother was a very thorough woman. There's a provision in her will, a very specific one, attached to a small property she owned. It was to be held in trust until her oldest grandchild turned 19, or until both of you were legally declared without guardianship, which, as of last night, you are." Maya and I exchanged a look. A property? It sounded impossible. We came from a long line of people who had nothing. "What kind of property?" Maya asked, her voice tight with suspicion. Mr. Henderson peered at the screen again. "It's a commercial lot with a small structure, in a town called Port Blossom. It's listed here as the Salty Dog Bait and Tackle. A bait shop." The absurdity of it was a sharp, painful laugh stuck in my throat. We had been kicked out of our home and inherited a derelict bait shop. It was a joke written by a cruel and lazy god. "There are complications," Mr. Henderson continued, his tone cautious. "There's a significant amount of back taxes owed on the property, several $1,000s. The county has placed a lien on it. If it's not paid, it'll be seized and sold at auction in about 6 months." My heart sank. Of course, there was always a catch. "But," he said, holding up a finger, "the will is very clear about the transfer of ownership. It's outside the regular probate process, a direct inheritance. To claim it, you have to appear in person at the Port Blossom Municipal Office, prove your identity, and pay a transfer fee." He paused for dramatic effect. $5. $5. For a piece of a world we didn't know, a gift from a ghost we couldn't remember. It was insane. It was hopeless. It was the only thing we had. Maya looked at me, and for the first time since we'd been standing on that curb, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something harder, sharper. It was a challenge. "How far is Port Blossom?" she asked. The bus ride felt like a journey to the edge of the world. For 2 days, we sat and watched America scroll by the greasy window. Endless fields of corn giving way to rolling hills, then dense forests of pine that smelled of rain and earth. We survived on gas station coffee and stale sandwiches, sleeping in awkward, neck-cricking positions, lulled by the constant drone of the engine. We were burning through the last of our cash, the crumpled bills Maya kept in an envelope, feeling thinner and thinner with every stop. We barely spoke. There was nothing to say that the rumble of the tires on the asphalt wasn't already saying for us. We were in motion, propelled forward into an unknown, leaving a past that was already turning to smoke in the rearview mirror. I spent most of the time with my headphones on, listening to the same sad songs on a loop, letting the melancholy wash over me. I thought about my mom. I tried to picture her in this town, Port Blossom. I tried to imagine the grandmother we never knew.
What kind of person leaves their grandchildren a bait shop? Not a house, not a savings bond, a place that sells worms and hooks. It felt like a riddle, and I was too tired to even begin trying to solve it. My guilt was a constant companion, a cold weight in my stomach. If I had just kept my mouth shut, if I had just swallowed my anger for a few more months, a few more years, Maya would still have a roof over her head. We wouldn't be on this bus to nowhere. Maya, on the other hand, was all forward momentum. She spent hours studying a tattered road map she'd picked up at a rest stop, tracing the blue lines of highways with her finger. She was calculating, planning, trying to wrestle some semblance of control from a situation that had none. She was the anchor, and I was the kite, and I worried that one day the string connecting us would just snap. We finally arrived in Port Blossom on a Tuesday afternoon. The bus hissed to a stop in front of a small one-room depot that looked like it hadn't been painted since the 70s. The air that hit us when the doors opened was thick and heavy, saturated with the smells of salt, low tide, and diesel fuel. It wasn't the fresh, breezy scent of a beach town postcard. It was the raw, industrial smell of a place that worked for a living. The sky was a uniform, pearly gray, and a low-hanging fog blurred the edges of the town, making it feel like we had stepped into a dream. The town itself was huddled around a small, protected harbor, filled with fishing boats, their hulls scarred and stained, their nets piled on the docks like sleeping sea monsters. The buildings along the main street were weathered and practical, their paint scoured away by years of salt and wind. There were no tourist traps, no t-shirt shops, just a diner, a hardware store, a small grocery, and a bar with a neon fish flickering in the window. The people we saw on the street had the same weathered look as the buildings. They moved with a slow, deliberate purpose, and their faces were etched with the lines of hard work and squinting at the sun. They glanced at us, at our out-of-place duffel bags and city clothes, with a frank, undisguised curiosity before looking away. We were aliens here. We found the municipal office in a small brick building next to the fire station. The woman behind the counter had a mountain of white hair and glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked at us over the rims as if we were a puzzle she couldn't be bothered to solve. "We're here to claim a property," Maya said, her voice steady and clear. "The Salty Dog Bait and Tackle." The woman's eyebrows shot up. "The old Vance place? Lord, haven't heard that name in years. Thought the sea had claimed that wreck a long time ago." She shuffled some papers, her movements slow and deliberate. "You got identification?" We showed her our driver's licenses. She held them close to her face, comparing the pictures to our tired, travel-worn faces. She grunted, apparently satisfied. "Says here the transfer fee is $5, and you're responsible for all outstanding liens and taxes. You understand that?" "We do," Maya said, placing a worn $5 bill on the counter. The woman stamped a form with a loud, satisfying thud, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a single, heavily rusted iron key attached to a faded plastic tag. The tag was so grimy you could barely make out the word salty. She slid it across the counter. "It's at the end of the public pier. Can't miss it," she said, a hint of something that might have been pity in her voice. "It's the one that's fallen down." We found it easily enough. It was less a building and more a suggestion of one, a skeletal structure clinging stubbornly to the end of a pier that groaned and shifted with every wave. The sign, a carving of a jaunty-looking dog holding a fishing pole, was so rusted and faded it was barely legible. The paint, once a cheerful sea blue, was now a tapestry of peeling flakes, revealing the gray, splintered wood beneath. The windows were boarded up with mismatched pieces of plywood, and the porch roof sagged so dramatically in the middle it looked like it was taking a bow. It was a monument to neglect. It was ours. "Oh, wow," I breathed. It was worse than I could have possibly imagined. It looked haunted. Maya just stood there, her face unreadable. She walked up the rickety steps, testing each one before putting her full weight on it. I followed, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. The key felt cold and heavy in my hand. It was real. This was real. The lock was a solid mass of rust. It took both of us, grunting and sweating, to force the key into the slot. For a moment, I was sure it would snap. But then, with a final desperate shove from Maya, it turned. A loud, grinding crack echoed in the damp air, like a bone breaking. The door swung inward on a single protesting hinge, opening into a square of absolute darkness. And the smell. It rolled out to meet us, a thick, cloying wave of decay. It was the smell of damp earth, of mildew, of stagnant water, of time itself rotting away in the dark. "Well," Maya said, her voice tight, "home sweet home." We stood there for a long time, hesitating on the threshold. Stepping inside felt like a final, irrevocable act. It meant accepting this place, this inheritance of ruin. But we had nowhere else to go. The bus station was a memory, the curb outside Rick's house a lifetime ago. This was the only door open to us. I took a deep breath, the foul air catching in the back of my throat, and stepped into the gloom. The only light came from the open doorway behind us, a single, weak rectangle of gray that did little to pierce the oppressive darkness. It illuminated a blizzard of dust motes, a swirling galaxy of decay that we stirred with every step. My foot landed on something soft and crunchy. I looked down to see a carpet of dead leaves and desiccated insects. The floorboards were bare wood, warped and stained with years of damp. As our eyes slowly adjusted, the shape of the room began to emerge from the shadows. It was a single, open space. Along one wall ran a long wooden counter, its surface coated in a thick, sticky layer of grime. Behind it, shelves lined the wall, still stocked with the ghosts of commerce. I could make out the shapes of jars, their contents long since turned to black sludge. Faded cardboard displays for fishing lures drooped sadly, their plastic bubbles yellowed and cracked. A calendar from 1998 was tacked to the wall, a picture of a leaping marlin forever frozen in time. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like grotesque chandeliers, thick and heavy with dust. In one corner, a puddle of dark water reflected the gray light from the door, evidence of a leak that had probably been dripping for decades. The air was so still and thick You could almost chew on it. Every sound was magnified. The drip of water, the creak of the floorboards under our feet, the frantic beat of my own heart. Maya found a light switch, but when she flicked it, nothing happened. The power had been cut long ago. "Of course," she muttered, wiping her dusty hand on her jeans. She was all business, her earlier shock already hardening into a grim resolve. She started walking the perimeter of the room, her footsteps echoing in the silence. I, on the other hand, felt rooted to the spot. I felt a strange and overwhelming sense of recognition. It was as if some forgotten part of me knew this place. A whisper of a memory, too faint to grasp. The smell, the quality of the light, the sound of the gulls crying outside. It all felt familiar in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't a good feeling. It was heavy, weighted with a sadness that didn't feel entirely my own. We found a door behind the counter that led to a small back room, probably a storage area or an office. It was even darker and damper than the main room. More shelves, mostly empty, and a small, rusted desk with a single drawer hanging open. In the corner was a stack of yellowed newspapers, their headlines announcing events that were now ancient history. There was also a steep, narrow staircase leading up. We climbed it cautiously, the steps groaning in protest. It opened into a tiny two-room apartment, a small living area with a kitchenette, and a bedroom barely big enough for a bed. A mattress, stained and moldy, lay on the floor. A single, grimy window looked out over the gray, churning water of the harbor. This was where someone had lived. Maybe our grandmother. The thought sent a chill down my spine. The intimacy of it, the profound sadness of this abandoned life, was suffocating. Maya was poking at the rotten window frame. "This is a teardown, Leo. The whole place. The foundation is probably shot. The roof is gone. It's worthless." "It's not worthless," I said, the words coming out before I'd even thought them. "It's ours." She turned to me, her face smudged with dirt, her expression a mixture of frustration and exhaustion. "Ours? Look at it. It's a wreck, a money pit. We don't have any money." She was right, of course. Rationally, she was 100% correct. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more here, something we were missing. I went back downstairs to the storeroom, drawn by an instinct I didn't understand. I ran my hand along the dusty walls, the grimy shelves. My gaze fell to the floor. In the far corner, half hidden by the pile of old newspapers, one of the floorboards looked different. It was shorter than the others, and the gap around it was slightly wider. My heart started to beat a little faster. It was like something out of a book. Kneeling down, I brushed away the debris. There was a small notch cut into the edge of the board. I hooked my fingers into it and pulled. It resisted at first, then came up with a low groan of old wood. And there, nestled in the dark, cool earth below, was a small metal box. It was an old cash box, the kind with a simple lock on the front, its black paint flaking off to reveal a layer of rust underneath. It wasn't a treasure chest. It was small and plain and very, very real. "Maya," I called, my voice cracking with a mixture of fear and excitement. "You need to see this." Maya came clattering down the stairs, her boots loud in the silence. She saw the box in my hands, and her eyes widened. "What is that?" "I found it under the floor." We carried it into the main room, into the single patch of daylight, and set it on the grimy countertop. It was locked. There was no key. For a frantic few minutes, we looked around the immediate area, hoping the key had been left nearby, but found nothing.
The frustration was a physical thing, a burning in my chest. We were so close to something. "The desk," Maya said suddenly. She ran back into the storeroom. I heard the sound of her rummaging, the screech of the single drawer being pulled out all the way. A moment later, she returned, holding a small, rusty screwdriver. "It's not a key, but it might be enough." She wedged the tip of the screwdriver into the seam next to the lock. She pushed. The metal groaned. She leaned into it, her knuckles white, her face set in a grimace of determination. I held my breath. With a sharp, ugly pop, the lock gave way. The lid sprang open an inch. We looked at each other. This was it. The secret at the heart of the ruin. I imagined stacks of cash, old coins, maybe jewelry. Something that could save us. Something that would make all of this worthwhile. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid. There was no money. The box was full of paper. A thick bundle of envelopes, tied together with a piece of faded blue ribbon. The paper was yellowed with age. The handwriting on the top envelope, a delicate, spidery script. On top of the bundle sat a single ornate brass key. It was heavy and old-fashioned, the kind of key you'd see in a fairy tale. Maya let out a breath of disappointment. Letters. It's just old letters. But I knew somehow that it wasn't just anything. I carefully lifted the bundle out of the box. The letters were addressed to "My dearest Anna," our mother's name. They were from her mother, our grandmother, Ilara. We sat down on the filthy floor, the gray light from the doorway falling across our laps. We untied the ribbon, its fabric so brittle it almost disintegrated in our hands. The letters were arranged in chronological order. We found the one on the bottom, the earliest one, and began to read. But it was the letter on the very top that held the real weight. It was dated just a few days before her death, a fact we'd learned from the file in Mr. Henderson's office. Her handwriting was shakier here, the elegant loops and swirls of her earlier letters replaced by a spiky, urgent script. I picked it up and began to read aloud, my voice a strange, wavering thing in the dusty silence. "My dearest Anna," it began, "if you are reading this, then the worst has happened, and I am gone. And if you are reading this here, in this place, it means you found your way home. I am so sorry, my love. I am sorry for every year I missed, for every birthday card that was never sent, for every phone call I never made. I need you to know that it was never because I didn't love you. It was because I loved you too much to let him find you." Him. The word hung in the air between us. "Your father," the letter continued, and I could feel Maya stiffen beside me, "was not the man you remember. The charm he showed the world was a mask for a darkness I couldn't see until it was too late. He was a creature of control, of anger. After you were born, it grew worse. He cut me off from my family, from my friends. He controlled every penny. He told me that if I ever tried to leave, he would make sure I never saw you again. And I believed him. He had connections, Anna, dangerous ones. Men who operated in the shadows. It wasn't an idle threat." I had to stop and take a breath. The story we'd been told was that our grandmother had run off, that she had abandoned her family for a new life. Our grandfather, who had died before I was born, was spoken of as a charming, if troubled man who had been heartbroken by her betrayal. It was all a lie. I kept reading. This place, this little shop, was my secret. It was the one thing I managed to buy with a small inheritance from my aunt that he didn't know about. I bought it under my maiden name. It was my escape plan for us.
I spent years fixing it up in secret, making it a safe harbor, a place where he could never touch us. I was just waiting for the right moment. But the moment never came. The cancer came first. By the time I knew how sick I was, it was too late to run. The ornate key slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the floorboards. Inside this box with these letters is a key. It is for a safe deposit box at the Port Blossom Bank. I saved every dollar I could over the years, Anna. Every bit of grocery money I could skim, every secret sale of the little things I made and sold at the market. It's not a fortune, but I hope it's enough. Enough for a start. Enough to be safe. This shop is more than just a building. It's a promise I made to you, a promise I couldn't keep in life. So I am leaving it for you in death. Don't let his shadow touch your life, or the lives of your children. Be free. Make this place a home. Be safe. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Your mother, Ilara. The letter ended there. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever felt. It was a silence filled with ghosts, the ghost of a grandmother we'd never known, a woman of incredible courage and quiet desperation. The ghost of our mother as a little girl, waiting for a rescue that never came. And the ghost of the truth, a living, breathing thing that had just rewritten our entire history. The dust motes danced in the light, each one a tiny, forgotten moment. I looked at Maya. Her face was a mask, but a single tear was tracing a clean path through the grime on her cheek. She wasn't the pragmatic captain anymore. She was just a girl who had lost her mother all over again.
All this time, she whispered, her voice rough with emotion. All this time, we thought she left us. The lie we had grown up with was that our grandmother was a selfish woman who had abandoned her family. Our mother rarely spoke of her, and when she did, it was with a deep, quiet sadness that we had mistaken for the pain of being left behind. Now we knew it was the pain of being kept apart. Our grandfather, the man we'd seen in a few faded photographs, the man our mother had described with a complicated, fearful respect, wasn't a tragic figure. He was a monster. And our stepfather, Rick, with his rules and his quiet control, and his final callous act of casting us out, he was just a pale imitation, a lesser ghost from the same dark story. I felt a surge of rage so pure and so hot it almost made me dizzy. It was a rage on behalf of my mother, for the life of fear she must have lived. A rage for my grandmother, who had died alone, her desperate plan unfulfilled. And a rage for us, for Maya and me, for the lies that had been the foundation of our childhood. Maya, however, channeled her grief into action. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving a muddy streak. She stood up, her body rigid. "The bank," she said, her voice hard as steel. "We're going to the bank. We'll get the money, we'll pay the taxes on this place, and we'll sell it to the first person who makes an offer. And then we are leaving this miserable, haunted town and never, ever looking back." I understood where she was coming from. She wanted to escape the story. She wanted to take the money, our grandmother's last, desperate gift, and use it to build a new life somewhere far away from all this pain. For her, the bait shop wasn't a safe harbor. It was a shipwreck, a monument to a failed dream. Selling it was a way to close the book. But I felt something different. I looked around the decaying room, at the cobwebs and the grime, and I didn't see a wreck. I saw a battlefield. I saw the last stand of a woman I'd never met, a woman who had tried to build a fortress for her daughter with nothing but scraps and secrets. Selling it felt like a betrayal. It felt like letting her down,
like letting the darkness she had fought against win in the end. "We can't sell it," I said quietly. Maya whirled on me, her eyes flashing. "What? Leo, be serious. Look at this place. It's a dump. It's a ghost. What are we supposed to do with it? Sell rotten bait to fishermen who probably all died 20 years ago?" "It was for Mom," I said, my voice gaining strength. "It was supposed to be her home. Our home. Grandmother Elara left it for us. She wanted it to be a home." "Mom is gone," Maya's voice cracked, the sound echoing in the empty shop. "She's gone, and our grandmother is gone. All we have is a pile of rotting wood and a box full of sad stories. I don't want to live in a sad story, Leo. I want to live in the real world. That money in the bank is our ticket to the real world. A world without this." She gestured around at the decay, at the shadows, at the weight of the past that was pressing down on us. We were standing on opposite sides of an invisible line. Maya saw the money as the inheritance, the key as a tool to get it. I was beginning to realize the shop itself was the real inheritance. The money was just the means to protect it. "Running away with the money is what grandfather would have done," I said, the thought solidifying as I spoke it. He was all about control, about taking things. Grandmother was about building something, a safe place. We can't just take the money and run. It feels wrong. It feels like we'd be proving him right. "This isn't about him," she shot back. "This is about us, surviving." "Maybe surviving isn't just about having money," I argued. "Maybe it's about having a place to stand, a place that's ours. No one can kick us out of here, Maya. This is ours." She just shook her head, tears of frustration welling in her eyes now. "You're not listening. It's too much. We can't do it." I walked out of the shop, the argument unresolved, the tension a thick, bitter thing between us. I went to the end of the pier, to the part that was still solid, and stared out at the water. The harbor was calm, the gray water slapping gently against the pilings. The fog was starting to burn off, and I could see the low, dark hills on the other side of the bay. The air was cold and clean. Have you ever been faced with a choice that felt like it would define the rest of your life? A moment where you can see two paths diverging so clearly, and you just know deep in your bones, that the person who walks down one will be fundamentally different from the person who walks down the other. That's where I was. One path was lit with the promise of money, of an easy escape, of a clean break. The other was dark and overgrown, and it led right back into that rotting, haunted bait shop. But it felt like the only path that was truly mine. Sometimes the hardest path is the one you know you have to take. If you're with me on this, if you've ever chosen the harder road because it felt like the right one, let me know in the comments. Your stories, they keep me going. They really do. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about a building. It was about breaking a cycle. Our family history was one of running. Our grandmother trying to run from a monster, our mother running from her past, us being forced to run from our home. This was our chance to stop running, to stand our ground, to build. I walked back inside, my resolve as solid as the old iron key in my pocket. I found Maya sitting on the counter, her head in her hands. The fight had drained out of her, leaving behind a profound weariness. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't try to argue. I just stood in front of her and started talking, my voice low and steady in the quiet room. "I know you're scared," I said. "I am too. This is insane. But think about it, Maya. For our whole lives, we've been living in someone else's house, by someone else's rules. Rick's house, our mother's house, which was really our grandfather's house. We've never had a single thing that was just ours. This is. I held up the rusted key to the shop. This is ours. The good, the bad, the rotten. All of it. I took a breath and continued, laying out my heart. Grandmother Ilara didn't just leave us money. If that was all she wanted, she would have just put it in a trust fund. She left us this place. She left us a home, or the possibility of one. She spent years building a lifeboat for Mom, and Mom never got to use it. Now it's our turn. We're in the water, Maya. This is our lifeboat. It's got a lot of holes in it, sure, but it's better than treading water until we drown. I could see her listening. Her defensiveness was softening, her shoulders slumping just a little. I don't want their story to be our story, I finished, my voice thick with emotion. I don't want to be defined by the bad men in our family. I want to be defined by the women who fought them. I want to honor her. I want to build something here, with you. She was quiet for a long time, just looking at me. I could see the war going on behind her eyes, the pragmatic survivor battling the grieving daughter. Finally, she slid off the counter and took the key from my hand, her fingers closing around mine for a second. Her touch was warm. "Okay, Leo," she sighed, a small, shaky breath. "Okay, we try. But first, we go to the bank. I need to know what we're dealing with." A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. "Okay," I said. "To the bank." The Port Blossom Bank was a formidable old building on the main street, made of granite and civic pride. It felt like it had been there forever. We walked in, feeling small and grimy in the cool, quiet, marble-floored lobby. A stern-looking man in a suit, the bank manager, looked at us with suspicion when we presented the ancient brass key and our IDs. But procedure was procedure. He led us down to the vault, a massive circular door of polished steel that looked like something out of a movie. With a series of clicks and whirs, he opened it and guided us into a small private room. A few moments later, he returned with a long, thin metal box and left us alone, closing the door softly behind him. The box was surprisingly heavy. Maya unlocked it with the brass key. We lifted the lid together. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, were neat, paper-banded stacks of cash. $100 bills. We counted it, our hands shaking. It wasn't a life-changing fortune, not the kind of money that lets you disappear onto a yacht. But it was more money than we had ever seen in our lives. It was $85,000. Enough. It was more than enough to pay the back taxes, to buy tools and materials for the most critical repairs, and to live on for a few months while we figured things out. Underneath the cash was a thick envelope. Inside was the official deed to the property, free and clear, in the name of Ilara Vance. And tucked inside the deed was one last piece of paper, a small, simple note in that same shaky handwriting from the last letter. It was only 7 words. "Make it a home. Be safe. Love, Ilara." Maya finally broke. She leaned her head against the cool metal of the box and cried. Not angry tears, not frustrated tears, but a deep, ragged sobbing of grief and gratitude and overwhelming release. I put my arm around her, and we stayed like that for a long time, 2 orphans in a bank vault, holding on to a ghost's last wish. The next morning, we walked into the municipal office and paid the back taxes. All $7,422 of it. The woman with the white hair counted the cash with a practiced efficiency, her expression unreadable. But when she handed us the paid receipt, she gave us a look that was a little less pity and a little more respect. We were no longer just a couple of stray kids. We were property owners. We were residents. We belonged. Then the real work began, the work of resurrection. We started by clearing out the decades of trash. We filled dozens of heavy-duty garbage bags with soggy newspapers, rotting merchandise, and unidentifiable filth.
We hauled it all to the town dump in a rusty wheelbarrow we found in the back room. The physical labor was brutal. Our muscles ached in ways we didn't know were possible. Our hands were raw with blisters. But every bag of trash we removed felt like a small victory. We were letting the light in, literally and figuratively. We scrubbed the floors and walls with bleach and wire brushes until the original wood began to show through the layers of grime. We tore out the moldy mattress and the rotten kitchenette from the upstairs apartment. We scraped peeling paint and pulled up warped floorboards. It was a slow, grueling, thankless process. Some days, the sheer scale of the decay felt insurmountable, and Maya's earlier doubts would resurface. We'd have a small, tense argument, then fall into an exhausted silence, only to pick up our tools and start again the next morning. We were powered by cheap coffee, stale donuts from the grocery store, and a stubborn refusal to fail.
Slowly, we started to meet people, or rather, they started to meet us. An old man named Silas, a fisherman with a face like a road map and hands like leather, would stop by every morning on his way to his boat. He'd watch us work for a few minutes, then offer a piece of unsolicited but always correct advice. That support beam's got rot. You'll need to sister it with new timber. Or, don't use galvanized nails that close to the salt water. They'll rust out in a year. You need stainless. He told us he remembered our grandmother. Tough woman, Ilara, he'd said, nodding slowly. Quiet, but tough as a barnacle. A woman named Maria, who ran the diner, would bring us a thermos of hot chowder some afternoons, refusing any payment. You kids need some meat on your bones, she'd say with a warm smile. We learned that the small community of Port Blossom was wary of outsiders, but they respected hard work. And they were beginning to see that we weren't afraid of it. We were just starting to feel like we might actually be able to pull it off, that our grandmother's dream was within our grasp when the modern world came knocking. We arrived at the shop one morning to find a sleek, cream-colored envelope taped to the front door. It was made of thick, expensive paper and addressed simply to the property owner. It felt alien against the weathered wood of our door. I tore it open. Inside was a letter printed on heavy bond paper with an embossed letterhead, Seaview Development Group. The language was smooth, corporate, and utterly chilling. It congratulated us on our ownership of the property and then made an offer to purchase it, along with the pier it sat on. The number they offered was staggering. It was more than 4 times the amount of cash our grandmother had left us. It was enough to buy a house, a car, to go to college, to start a life free from financial worry. It was the easy path, presented to us on a silver platter. And then came the second page. It was a legal notice, a notice of violation from the county planning department. It listed, in cold, bureaucratic detail, every way our property failed to meet current zoning and safety codes. Faulty electrical wiring, which was non-existent. Inadequate plumbing, also non-existent. Structural instability. Failure to comply with commercial accessibility standards. The list went on and on. We were given 90 days to bring the property up to code. Failure to comply would result in escalating daily fines and, eventually, seizure of the property by the county. The letter from Seaview Development ended with a smooth, friendly closing line.
We understand that meeting these modern standards can be a significant financial burden, and we are happy to provide a simple, profitable alternative. It was a checkmate, a perfectly legal, perfectly ruthless move to squeeze us out. They had us.
We had just enough money to fix the place up to a basic, livable standard, but not enough for a full commercial-grade rewiring, plumbing, and structural overhaul. They knew it. They had probably been waiting for years for someone to claim the property so they could pounce. The 90-day clock was ticking. We sat on the porch steps, the letter and the violation notice lying between us like a snake. The hope that had been so painstakingly built over the last few weeks evaporated, leaving behind the cold, hard reality of our situation. We were two kids with a dwindling pile of cash against a faceless corporation with an army of lawyers. "They're going to take it, Leo," Maya said, her voice hollow. "After all this, they're just going to take it." I didn't have an answer. For the first time, I felt the true weight of despair settle over me. I looked out at the water, at Silas's boat heading out for the morning catch, and I felt like we were about to be washed away by a tide we couldn't possibly fight. We were out of our depth. We needed help. That afternoon, we went to the diner and showed the letter to Maria. She read it, her lips tightening into a thin, angry line. "Seaview," she spat, the name like a curse. "They've been sniffing around here for years, trying to buy up the waterfront to build their plastic condos for rich people from the city. They forced old man Hemlock out of his boat repair shop last year. Same trick." "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Maria wiped her hands on her apron and thought for a moment. "You need a lawyer, but not one of theirs. You need someone who knows how they work. You need to go see Arthur Davies." She scribbled an address on the back of a napkin. "He's semi-retired, but he lives just outside of town. He's been fighting developers like this his whole life. Hates them more than he hates cold coffee." She pushed the napkin across the counter. "Go talk to him. Tell him Maria sent you." Arthur Davies lived in a small, cluttered house filled with books. Books were stacked on shelves, on tables, on the floor. The air smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. He was a small, wiry man with a shock of white hair and bright, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He listened patiently as we spilled out our entire story, being kicked out, the inheritance, the letters, the box, the money, and finally, the threat from Seaview. We even showed him our grandmother's letters. He read them carefully, his expression thoughtful. When we were finished, he leaned back in his worn leather armchair and steepled his fingers. "A classic squeeze play," he said, his voice calm and pragmatic. "They use the county code enforcement as their muscle. They find a vulnerable property, file a complaint, and then swoop in with a low-ball offer that looks like a godsend to the beleaguered owner. It's predatory, but it's not technically illegal." "So there's nothing we can do?" Maya asked, her voice laced with defeat. "I didn't say that," Mr. Davies said, a flicker of a smile touching his lips. "There are always things you can do. We can file for extensions. We can challenge the assessment. We can apply for historical preservation grants that might exempt you from some of the modern codes. It will be a fight, a long, expensive, and deeply unpleasant paper war. They are counting on you not having the stomach or the resources for it." He looked from my face to Maya's, his gaze sharp and appraising. "The question is, do you? You could take their offer. It's a lot of money. More than enough for two young people to get a fresh start somewhere else. No one would blame you." This was the moment of truth, the final test. The world was offering us an exit ramp, A clean getaway. We could take the money and walk away from the mold, the rot, the fight, the ghosts. We could be comfortable. We could be safe. I looked at Maya. She was looking at the faded letter from our grandmother that lay on the table between us. I saw her read the final words again. Make it a home. Be safe. And I think we both realized in that same instant what our grandmother had truly meant. Safe didn't mean running from a fight. It didn't mean a life without struggle. It meant having a place to anchor yourself against the storm. It meant having a home, a real one, that no one could take from you. The money from Seaview was just cash. It would be spent, and we'd be adrift again. The bait shop, this wreck, this burden, it was an anchor. The money our grandmother had left us wasn't for an escape. It was a war chest. It was the armor she was giving us for the very fight she knew would one day come. Maya looked up from the letter, first at Mr. Davies and then at me. Her eyes were clear and steady. The captain was back at the helm. "We're not selling," she said, her voice ringing with a conviction that sent a shiver down my spine. "We're going to fight." Mr. Davies broke into a wide, genuine grin. "Excellent," he said, rubbing his hands together. "I was hoping you'd say that. Now, let's talk strategy. They want a war? We'll give them one." He offered to take our case pro bono, his fee a small percentage of the business's profits, if and when it ever turned one. For him, it was never about the money. It was about justice. It was about protecting the soul of his town. The months that followed were a blur of activity. The legal battle raged in the background, a slow-moving storm of paperwork. Mr. Davies filed motions, extensions, and challenges, bogging Seaview's lawyers down in a swamp of bureaucratic red tape, buying us precious time. Meanwhile, Maya and I threw ourselves into the physical work with a renewed, almost frantic energy. Word of our fight got around town. Our story, passed in whispers over coffee at the diner and beers at the bar, transformed us from curious outsiders into something else. We were underdogs. We were the town's fight. Silas, the old fisherman, started showing up with his toolbox and a couple of his buddies on weekends, teaching us how to frame a wall, how to seal a roof, how to do things the right way, the way that lasts. Maria organized a potluck painting party, and half the town showed up one Saturday with brushes, rollers, and casseroles. And by the end of the day, the old, peeling structure was coated in a fresh, cheerful coat of sea blue paint. We weren't just rebuilding a shop. We were becoming part of a community. These people, who had been strangers just a few months ago, were weaving us into the fabric of their town. They were helping us build our home. With Mr. Davies's help, we navigated the labyrinth of permits and grants. We discovered that because the pier was one of the oldest original structures in the harbor, we were eligible for a small historical preservation grant. It wasn't much, but it was enough to hire a licensed electrician and plumber to do the work we couldn't, bringing the building up to a basic, functional code. We decided early on that we weren't going to just be a bait and tackle shop. The world had enough of those. We wanted to create something that reflected our own story, our grandmother's legacy. We kept the old rusted sign, the Salty Dog, but we added a new hand-painted one below it, the Safe Harbor. We built a small, simple coffee bar at one end of the long counter. We found an old espresso machine at a yard sale and fixed it up. Maria taught Maya how to make her famous clam chowder. We would sell bait and tackle to the fishermen in the morning, and coffee and chowder to everyone else all day. It was a place for people to come in from the cold, to warm their hands on a hot mug, to look out at the water and feel, for a little while, safe. The story doesn't have a fairy tale ending where the evil corporation is vanquished forever. The fight with Seaview is ongoing. Their letters still arrive, though they are less frequent now, their tone more frustrated. The threat is always there, a shadow on the horizon. There are days when we are so tired we can barely stand. Days when an unexpected repair bill wipes out our meager savings and we have to live on chowder for a week. The work is never, ever done. But this morning, I woke up in my small bed in the apartment above the shop. I woke up to the sound of the gulls crying and the smell of salt air and brewing coffee. I went downstairs to find Maya already at the counter, laughing with Silas as she handed him his morning coffee and a container of worms. The lights were on. The water was running. The room was warm and clean and filled with the smell of new wood and old stories. I stepped out onto the new porch, its boards solid and steady under my feet, and watched the sun rise over the harbor, painting the gray water with strokes of orange and pink. We did it. We're doing it. We took a ruin and we built a home. We took a sad story and we're giving it a new ending. It wasn't about the money or the building or even the fight. It was about choosing. We chose to honor the sacrifices of the woman who came before us. We chose to stand our ground. We chose each other. That's where our story is right now. It isn't over. The fight isn't won. But for the first time in our lives, we have a place to stand. And that's a start. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever had to fight for your own safe harbor, or build a home out of the wreckage of your past, please subscribe. And more than that, share a piece of your story in the comments below. Reading them, knowing there's a community of people out there who get it, it reminds us that we're not alone in this, and that's a truth worth more than any inheritance. Thank you for listening.